Let's take a little bit further look into this right triangle trig. Example 4 on here, we're actually going to take this out, and you should go to the worksheet. Okay, so please go to the worksheet that has to do with solving right triangles. So now we went to the worksheet. This is a little bit different than just naming all 6 sides, because you have to actually determine what side you're looking for. And so then you have to determine which trig function you're using. And so here's number 1. Here's my angle, 34 degrees. Okay, it's in degrees, so make sure if you're using a calculator that you're using the calculator in degrees. So I've got 34 degrees. I've got an angle or a side that's opposite, and I've got the hypotenuse. Okay, so I've got 34 degrees. I've got the opposite side, and I've got the hypotenuse. Well, you have 2 options on which trig function you want to use. You could use either the sine, which is opposite over hypotenuse, or you could use the cosecant, which is the hypotenuse over the opposite. Okay? Doesn't necessarily matter, but there's one that's easier than the other one. And so we'll set both of them up and then choose which one is easier. So I've got the sine of 34 degrees. It is equal to the opposite, which is x over 13.4. Or I've got the cosecant of 34 degrees. It is equal to 13.4 over x. Well, let's take a second. I'll actually move this one over here, and we'll solve it. This is not work for this triangle, so if you're joining this at this point, it's not work for this triangle. It's actually for number 1 still. So we're looking at solving sine of 34 degrees equals x over 13.4. Well, in order to solve this, to get x by itself, I have to multiply by 13.4 on both sides. Well, that means I've got 13.4 times the sine of 34 degrees, and that's just a calculator problem. Okay, I just plug that into my calculator and end up with an answer there. On the other side, if I want to get this x by itself, I have to multiply by x, and so I get x times cosecant of 34 degrees is equal to 13.4. Well, that's not really that big of a deal, because if I want to get the x by itself, I'm just using normal solving techniques here. Cosecant, I don't want to keep writing cosine. Cosecants cancel, and I get x is equal to 13.4 over cosecant of 34 degrees. And I can now just plug that into the calculator and figure that out too. But I have to remember that 13.4 divided by, and then I have to put in parentheses 1 divided by sine of 34 degrees. Okay, so make sure that you're going through and you understand how to type that in the calculator. This version over here is a lot harder than doing the sine. Okay, so if I were to choose one, I would not choose this one. Although it's correct, I'm not going to choose it, because on this side I did one step. I multiplied by 13.4, and I ended up getting what I need for an answer then. Okay, and so it's a matter of deciding beforehand what's going to be easier, instead of going through and doing a lot more extra work. And so if you did that, you should end up with x is equal to 7.49. Let's round everything on this worksheet to hundredths. Okay, let's round everything to hundredths. So go through, decide which trig function is going to be best for you to be using. Okay, so let's get rid of this work, so that we can come back and look at problem number 2 here. So problem number 2, I've got, here's my angle. So I've got 72 degrees. I've got the side, again, that I'm looking at that's opposite. And I've got the side that's adjacent. So again, there's a couple ways that you could do this. But the fastest way, I think, would be that opposite over adjacent is tangent. And the x is going to be on top again. So if I do tangent of 72, is equal to the opposite, which is x, over the adjacent, which is 19. Now, all I have to do is multiply by 19 on both sides. And I get 19 times tangent of 72, and it's still 72 degrees, is equal to x. Now again, this is just a calculator thing, and so x is equal to 58.48 for this problem. Okay, keep going through, working through each one of these problems. If you've got questions, make sure you're asking them. Okay, this is not as easy as it looks. You need to learn how to decide which trig function you want to use. Okay, we kind of jump down, all of these have an angle, a side. I'm not sure how to get rid of that. There we go. Have an angle, a side, and either the hypotenuse or the other side. Okay, so you need to decide which trig function you're going to go through and use. They're all going to be calculator based, so it's best for you to be using your calculator on all of these and going through solving them and rounding to 2 decimal places on all of them.